On this episode of UFC Inside the Octagon, we dissect the women's featherweight title clash between reigning champion Amanda the Lioness Nunes and number one contender Felicia Phenom Spencer. Making the first defense of the 145-pound title since her demolition of Chris Cyborg, the pride of Brazil, Amanda Nunes, looks to extend her run as the UFC's only current two-weight champion. Aiming to overthrow the Lioness, however, is the Phenom Felicia Spencer. Having emerged as the division's number one contender with her brutal finishing ability, Felicia Spencer has proven herself as the next in line.
Perhaps your featherweight challenger is Felicia Spencer.
Will the Phenom complete her destiny, or will the Lioness roar once again? Hello and welcome to UFC Inside the Octagon. John Gooden, Dan Hardy. We are back with you for a big number. It is UFC 250. Little fact, UFC 200 was main evented by the same individual. It is, of course, Amanda Nunes. She will be defending her featherweight title against Felicia Spencer. Dan, this is a big one. We've seen the consensus greatest female MMA fighter of all time. She's now going to be making her first defense at featherweight. What do you make of this one?
I'm excited for it because I think it's a different kind of challenge for her. You know, she's fought very tough fighters at bantamweight. She's fought, you know, one of the greatest at featherweight. But Felicia Spencer's a different kind of opponent. She's very durable, as we saw in the Cyborg fight. She's got the kind of style that could really wear Amanda Nunes out over 25 minutes. And the big question is, you know, what does Nunes look like, you know, in the later rounds at 145? That's the biggest question. And, you know, to be the champ, you've got to be prepared for those championship rounds. And I kind of feel like Felicia Spencer might be able to push her there.
This is good. New challenges for the two-weight champion. Always excited to see her in the octagon and see new stars emerge as well. Let's pull up the facts and the stats then and put these two women side by side. Now, if I'm honest, Dan, well, let's look at the physicalities first. What do you make of this one? Obviously, Felicia Spencer, the more natural featherweight. Amanda Nunes, I guess you could say, has stepped up, but are you seeing anything in these sizes?
No, I mean, I think, you know, if you look at previous opponents of Felicia Spencer, she's fought bigger opponents previously. You know, when she was in Invicta, she was fighting taller opponents, strong opponents, you know, fighters with a good physical presence like Amanda Nunes, but fighters that are much more naturally featherweights than Nunes is. And I would say, you know, alongside Cyborg as well, you know, she fought someone that was incredibly strong and was able to hold her own in those clinches. I mean, I know she lost the fight, but she gave a good account of herself, especially at this stage in her career. Yes, Nunes is, you know, she can make bantamweight. She is stepping up to fight at featherweight, but it's probably much more of a comfortable weight class for her. The question is, you know, what does she look like over 25 minutes, and does that additional 10 pounds on her frame change her in any way? I think Felicia Spencer, because of the way that she's built and the way that she fights, she can keep up a consistent pace all the way through the fight. And I think that's where the challenge is for Nunes, who, you know, she could potentially get worn down a little bit because she's probably got more muscle mass on her frame.
There's some factual information here, Dan, but if I'm honest, I don't really want to regard it too heavily. I hope you agree. We got such sparkling stats for Amanda Nunes, and with all due respect to Felicia Spencer, she's come into this organisation not too long ago, so she hasn't really been able to develop a lot of that statistical information. The meat is in the analysis, Dan. We want to hear what you've got to say. So let's, with that in mind, go straight to Felicia Spencer then. And before we actually get into the detail, can you just give us an indication of where she's come from and the proving ground of Invicta FC? Because she was a champion there before.
Yeah, she's, you know, she had all of her fights before the UFC in Invicta. And the good thing with that is, you know, obviously I can go back and watch those fights. I can see those opponents, and those matches are going to be well made because, you know, the Invicta matchmaking, Invicta's a promotion very close to the UFC. So the standard of matchmaking is high, and the scouting for, you know, for talent is high as well. So the opponents that she faced on the way through the Invicta, you know, divisions were very, very tough and gave her different looks that I think she can expect in this fight coming up at the weekend. I mean, there were tough fights. The difference is I think Amanda Nunes puts everything together very well. But we can't disregard the experience that she's had, because she's fought a very strong judoka in Amy Coleman. She fought an aggressive boxer in Al Hamid. So, there are certain experiences that she's had that, I mean, I think prepared her very well to face Cyborg. And I think she did quite well with that fight. She just wasn't able to get into it. But I think the difference is over 25 minutes, which, she has fought into the fourth round before when she won the Invicta title. She got the rear naked choke, and that was a consistent performance for 4 rounds where she chased the rear naked choke, she wore her opponent down. And I feel like if anybody's going to beat Amanda Nunes, it's not going to be to blast her out of the water in the first round. I think she's too tough, she's too durable, and her footwork's too good to pin her down. But over the distance, if you can wear on her, and that's what I've seen Felicia Spencer do over the years in Invicta, I think that's really the game plan she has to present to Nunes.
All right, well, let's dive straight in then. And one of the things that I noted from my analysis of Felicia Spencer, going back through that catalogue of Invicta fights, was that she is predominantly an MMA grappler. However, if you look into her bio, if you like, she has a black belt in Taekwondo, and they were the bits that really stuck out for me. Her ability to kick off of the front foot, her hips, the dexterity in them. She really can cause some problems with her striking.
She can cause problems, but nothing that I've seen that I would consider to be fight ending. And this is her disadvantage in this fight. We know Amanda Nunes can blast fighters out of the water, drop them with one clean punch, jump on them, choke them out. I don't feel like that's something that she's necessarily going to have to worry about coming back the opposite way. Because Felicia Spencer, I mean, her punches they don't have a great deal of snap to them, but it's like a waterfall. They're constantly coming at you. They wear you down because you're getting peppered with these punches as she's working her way into, to implement the rest of her game. Clinch, knees, takedowns, and all that kind of stuff. Her strikes on the floor, as we'll talk about later, are very impactful, and they're far more precise and far more damaging. On the feet, the punches are much more to serve a purpose of pushing her opponent back or creating space. And this is where the hip dexterity comes in, that Taekwondo black belt. The ability to push an opponent back so they know the fence is approaching behind, and they either go straight back up against the fence where she grabs a hold, or they peel off from one side or the other. And whichever direction they go, she's got a high kick waiting to catch them. That's something that we've seen her do all the way through her career, not to the impact that she's going to hurt somebody, but to the impact that she can start the beginning of the end. You know what I mean? Stun somebody, chase somebody down, finish the rest of the game. The process of her game started with one of those high kicks.
So switching over to the champ, Amanda Nunes, and if we consider the early exchanges, Dan, and if indeed Felicia Spencer does come forward and look to lead the dance, what is the champ's first line of defence?
Well, I think Nunes is going to be a bit more strategic in this fight. I think even though, a lot of the fans will be underestimating Felicia Spencer, I don't think Nunes will be. I think she's going to realise how durable she was in the Cyborg fight and the types of finishes that she's got. I mean, there's a consistency to her game, and that's what makes her dangerous. If you have a fighter that's had 10 fights and you look down their record and they've had a triangle and a knockout with knees and a head kick knockout, you kind of don't know what to expect. If you've got someone that's been consistent all the way through their career, they take people down, they ground and pound them and choke them out, that's something to take seriously because it's a formula that's working. So Nunes needs to be cautious in the early going. If she goes rushing in, she's going to find herself in a clinch and then battling takedowns that she doesn't need. I expect her to start quite cautiously, but not cautiously from the outside. See, the problem is if she gives Felicia Spencer too much space, then she gives her that space to run into, to grab a hold of her, to throw punches, to kicks. If she keeps pressure on her and keeps Felicia Spencer up against the fence, she can pick her off, but negate that range. But in order to push her back against the fence, she's got to use that kicking game that we've seen her use. I mean, even more recently, she's been very effective with it. Raquel Pennington is the first one that comes to mind. And one thing that she has to keep in mind going into this is that because Felicia Spencer's able to change stance quite comfortably, she has to have options for both sides. So, and this is a benefit because obviously Shevchenko's a southpaw and Pennington's orthodox. So she's had good opportunities to use the weapons of each stance effectively. So Shevchenko first Shevchenko's southpaw. So what we saw against the southpaw was that powerful teep to the midsection off the back leg, which is going to be useful for keeping Felicia Spencer back, and then the outside low kick and the oblique kick to work the lead leg. She doesn't tend to throw the inside low kick to southpaws, especially against Felicia Spencer, because she does tend to kind of push forward with her hands. She's going to find herself bullied off balance. When Spencer switches to orthodox, that's when she's going to go to the low calf kick. And if you think the first 30 seconds of the Pennington fight, that defined the rest of the fight for me. She kicked her hard in the calf, she bruised the leg, she knocked her off her feet, and then straight away Pennington was very timid on that leg. If she can take that kind of movement away from Spencer, then she can start dictating the pace with her boxing range. And she needs to, in my opinion, kind of stay right in the bookends of the kicking range in the clinch game. And she's able to do that by slowing Spencer down with her kicking game and then pressuring up against the fence with her hands.
And I think I agree with you, Dan, because Spencer tends to like the fence work, and if Felicia Spencer's got her back against the fence, it's a long way to push Amanda Nunes back in order to get her in her range. Of course, you can try and turn the fight, but a more direct approach. You mentioned the boxing of Nunes. I absolutely love the way that she extends everything with her hands, and I'm not sure that there are many examples in mixed martial arts of a fighter that literally catches you on the very tip of their extension. Before you get into the analysis, Dan, can you tell us why that's important?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, we talk about reach and reach advantages and all that kind of thing. If you've got two fighters that have got the same reach and one extends their punches and the other one doesn't, and I'm talking about extension in lots of different ways. Extension from the back foot. So say if I'm talking about my right hand, I'm driving off my right foot and I'm forcing that as far forward as I can, but I need to extend my shoulder joint as well as bring my hip forward and allow my whole midsection to twist and basically communicate the power from my back foot into the punch. A lot of fighters pull the punch short. I mean, we've talked about it before, and I don't want to sound critical because he's made it work for him, but Stipe Miocic has got a long reach, but he pulls those punches very short, which means he needs to be very close to his opponents, or like the Verdum fight, he needs them running at him in order to land that punch. And this is something that changed in his game, whereas Nunes, in my opinion, has gone the opposite way. Her punches have gotten better. The execution of the punches, the extension of the punches has improved. And that's going to be very important, because if we're trying to, if we're talking about a game plan where she's pushing her opponent back but has to maintain pressure with boxing, she needs every inch of that range that she can use. Felicia Spencer under pressure is still going to be trying to throw kicks. So Nunes being able to punch her over those kicks is going to be very useful, and that full extension of the punches is where that comes in.
Well, Dan, when you consider this fight, then Nunes does have an inch reach advantage, but actually I think that's a very valuable inch. How do you think she'll use it against Spencer?
Well, I think, I fully expected to pressure Spencer up against the fence. So if we go back to the later rounds against Pennington, when she'd really started to take over that fight, the kicks had paid dividends. She'd hit the midsection a lot, the lead leg was battered. So Pennington's now basically a sit and duck against the fence. She was able to keep her at arm's length and pepper her with punches. Until, Pennington decided she was going to do something. She actually stepped into the clinch and started to get kneed there, which is something else Nunes will use. But if we watch the difference in the intention of the clinch between Nunes and Spencer, Nunes is always trying to maintain distance, which I want to talk about in a little while, but like maintaining distance, keeping space, building frames. She's not interested in getting body to body with Spencer. So those long reaches, if she can keep her back up against the fence and pick her off, I just think it's gonna keep her exactly where she wants her all the time and force Spencer to do things that she doesn't want to do. Well,
considering Spencer, Dan, one thing that really stuck out for me was a few of the techniques that she's used from her very first pro fight that Cyborg found out about, and I am of course talking about her elbows. How much do you think her elbow game is going to be an advantage for her in this fight?
I think, it's going to be a big advantage. As you talked about in her earlier fights, she was good at closing distance and forcing people up against the fence with one of those, like 100% commitment smash elbows, because she's hitting that elbow with the intention of crashing behind it. With the Cyborg fight, that was much more of a precise kind of. I mean, she's still trying to close distance to clinch, but the intention was to do far more damage with that elbow, and she did great damage. I mean, in the first 30 seconds, she jumps in with the lead elbow and cuts Cyborg bad, and that for me shaped my perspective of the first round. And she landed the same elbow a little later on in that same round again. I just feel like that's something that she can use to quickly cover that gap against Nunes. Possibly negate taking punches on the way in, because if you think the way that she jumps in, like she against Cyborg, she was using the lead elbow, so that lead elbow is covering a lot of her head, and then the other hand's coming up here, so she's basically crashing through the guard or any punches that are coming towards her to land that elbow. And even if the elbow doesn't land, it serves the purpose of getting her close, which then allows her to go into those knees to the midsection. And if we're talking about her playing the long game, wearing Amanda Nunes down, if you're trying to finish the fight early, you punch somebody in the head. If you're trying to slow them down, you work the body and the legs. Like those knees to the midsection against Nunes is an additional taxation on her cardiovascular system. Like if Felicia's thinking she's going to get the win in the 4th or 5th round, she wants to take everything out of Nunes that she can in that process. So yes, the elbows to the head are going to be useful, but the knees to the body that follow are going to be even more valuable to her, and that will allow her to start then working the trips and stuff that she's got up against the fence.
Always fascinating stuff, Dan. We're going to pause for just a moment. Plenty more analysis on this one. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to UFC Inside the Octagon, where we're talking about the UFC 250 main event for women's featherweight honours. Dan, what have we learned so far?
Well, I think, Nunes is going to be patient in this one. She's back up at featherweight and she's fighting a very durable individual. So I expect her to try and dictate the range in the octagon with her kicks, work that lead leg regardless of what stance Felicia Spencer's in, but ultimately have her backed up against the fence where she can maintain that boxing range and keep her under pressure. And for Spencer, I mean, she's got to get her hands on Nunes. She's got to close the range down, get her hands on her. And then, I expect elbows and knees to help her close that distance, but then it's all about getting the fight to the floor, really.
Yeah, absolutely. She's not typically someone that gets the fight finished on the feet, Dan. She wants to take this down to the canvas where she has a greater opportunity to finish this contest.
Yeah, she's got a few different options. She doesn't tend to shoot. She doesn't tend to level change and shoot. Most of her takedowns are, body to body, whether that's trips and reaps or some kind of high crotch takedown up against the fence. We have seen her, land takedowns in the center of the octagon, but it's unlikely that she's going to do that here. I feel like Nunes' building frames is going to be too difficult for her to close distance. The key here is going to be getting Nunes up against the fence where she can get that head position, something that she's used very well in pretty much every one of her fights. She gets head position up under the chin and makes it very uncomfortable for her opponent, and then starts working the body with punches and knees, and then starts to try to trip the legs. I mean, if they're resisting the leg trips, then she'll go to the high crotch and give them a lift and get them to the floor. In that way, but the trips and reaps tend to do the job. She's good at manipulating the base of her opponent and seeing where their balance lies on what leg, and then just removing that post. And again, being able to distribute her own body weight and shift her own body weight to allow less energy to be expended, but the takedown still to be successful.
As you say, Dan, she does that so well. So what will the champ need to do to stop herself getting into those ranges against a true 145er over 5 rounds?
Well, Nunes is obviously physically very strong. We've seen that in every one of her fights where she's been challenged in that range. I also expect her to have good takedown defense in every range, but I think that she's going to find it easier to stop takedowns out in the open. There's a recklessness to the way that Felicia Spencer covers distance when they're out in open space. And Nunes is going to be able to read that. She's going to be able to see it. I mean, Holly Holm was doing it to her. Valentina Shevchenko were doing it to her. And I would say that both of those fighters have got a more educated approach to closing distance. As they close distance, Nunes was still being able to build frames and just deny any kind of takedown. And the Holly Holm one is the one that sticks out to me because, that was a very, very intelligent way of breaking the clinch. She threw a couple of punches, Holm closes the distance and gets a hold of her, and then you can see Nunes physically trying to disengage, but then realizes that Holly Holm's got too good of a control on her, and actually goes for the takedown herself to initiate a scramble to escape. Out in the open, Felicia Spencer's really going to struggle to get a hold of Amanda Nunes. It's up against the fence, and that's where Nunes is going to be challenged. That takedown offense up against the fence. Against Durandamy, she got a great switch up against the fence, and I expect her to use those kind of things, but the head pressure is going to be problematic for her, I would think.
Dan, I think the real jewel in Spencer's game is her MMA grappling. For me, it's beautiful to watch. She's so aggressive and just clinical, which is quite different to the way that she strikes on her feet. Take us through some of this stuff, because we haven't seen Felicia Spencer, and this is where she really gets it done.
Yeah, this is the nuts and bolts of her game. This is where she has most of her success, and we've talked about this before. It's a cycle that fighters can get caught in. We see it with Daniel Cormier. We see it with Khabib. They trap a fighter in a cycle where they're up against the fence, and this is where fatigue plays a factor. This is where Amanda Nunes' takedown defense being successful is, finite. It's going to run out at some point. If she finds herself up against the fence in that first round and she's defending takedowns, she might get taken down once or twice and get back to her feet. But if Spencer can keep putting that cycle on her, the end result is fatigue, which end results in vulnerability, which turns their back and gives the rear naked choke. And that's where Felicia Spencer's going to be trying to push this game. She'll work the takedown until it's successful. Every time Nunes gets taken down, she'll get fatigued and she'll start scrambling back to her feet. She'll eventually make mistakes and give her back, and then Spencer will jump on her. And what I love about Felicia Spencer's game is that there's no thought process of position, pin, strike. Everything's all in one. Like, as she's passing, she's pinning an arm and she's already punching you in the face. And she uses her strikes to prompt movement from her opponents. Like, most people won't turn their back unless they're having a barrage of punches landed on them. And she's very strategic with the way that she lands her punches to force movement in her opponents, to give the back. It's a cycle that Nunes can't get caught in, because if she does, she's really up against it. I mean, she could find herself there for as long as it takes for the rear naked choke to find its way in.
Interesting detail, Dan. One thing that I think is pretty key to this as well is the fact that there is no crowd. Amanda Nunes is a big draw. There's a lot of energy around her when she steps into the octagon. How do you think both fighters are going to react to this no crowd thing? Does it, again, favour either one of them?
It's a good question. I think it helps that there's not a hostile crowd there, because what we saw in the Cyborg fight for Felicia Spencer is that the crowd did rally behind her and that did lift her, and I feel like it added a bit to her performance. If she's in a territory where it's a hostile crowd and everyone's in favour of Nunes, then that pressure could be evident in her performance as well. So I think that does work out better for her. The other thing that comes to mind as well is that the setup that they'll be able to create a American Top Team is going to be very similar to what it feels like at the Apex.
Interesting.
I mean, that gym, the high ceilings, they wrap black fabric around their octagon as well to make it feel very kind of enclosed, so no one can watch, basically. But I think the actual space will feel quite familiar to Amanda Nunes as far as like a sparring day. But the crowd not being there, I think, does play into Spencer's hands.
Nice one, Dan. Thank you very much for all of your thoughts and analysis. UFC 250 headlined by Amanda Nunes, the two-weight champion, the only remaining two-weight champion. Will she still have the belt after she faces off against Felicia Spencer? We will find out. Enjoy the fights, my friends. Thank you very much for watching. Continue the conversation using the hashtag Inside the Octagon. Why don't you give a tweet at UFC Europe, and we will catch you next time.